Hello and welcome back to Chat About It. Don't chat about it with me, Rachel, the Queen of the Workverse, crowned by one of my haters. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed already. I really couldn't do this without you. I'm trying to get to 1,200 subscribers. Can I do it? Who knows? Now, this week, I'm actually taking a break from the Classic Who reviews to review a brand new story in Doctor Who from the classic era. Author Will Hadcroft sent through his new BBC audiobook, Dark Contract. This video is not sponsored. This is the copy that he sent me. Thanks very much for sending it through, Will. Dark Contract is set in Dickensian London. The Doctor, Adric, Nyssa, and Tegan land in the midst of mysterious deaths. Donning period disguises in an attempt to lie low, it isn't actually long before the Doctor gets involved and the companions get separated and unearth a mysterious dark contract within the London boroughs. Dark Contract is written by Will Hadcroft, as I've already said, and it is read by Matthew Waterhouse, who played Adric in the original TV series. Now, please be aware that this review may contain spoilers. I've done my best to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, but there is a little bit of spoilers within this review, so please do be careful. I actually do highly recommend that you listen to it first before watching this review and then come back. I have linked it below as to where you can buy it from. The link is not an affiliate, and like I said, this video is not sponsored. I have also linked my past review of Will's work that I have left here on this channel, and the interview that I did with him in the lead up to the release of this audio about his book, The Resurrection Plant. Well, the audiobook, I should say, to be more precise. So in my last review of The Resurrection Plant, I noted that the story was mostly sci-fi with a historical reference to the Industrial Revolution. This story, Dark Contract, actually does a complete 180 on that. This story is very much a historical period story with sci-fi that's set in Dickensian London. And whilst we don't actually follow any named notable historical characters that I could work out, it follows the lives of the poorer people in London. So, of course, like I said in my last one, the one thing that I always look out for in Doctor Who is the clinching plot point. The thing that the viewer or listener can hang on to. In this, it was the fact that this story is obviously set in 1835, 1 year after the Poor Law was introduced. Now, the Poor Law was introduced in 1834 to ensure that the poor were fed, clothed, and in the workhouses. Now, huge spoiler. Well, maybe not that huge, but it is a spoiler. We do see the workhouses, but I'm not telling you how we get to see them. You have to listen to the story for yourself to find that out. The Poor Law has some usage in this story, you see, and that's why it's mentioned. There's one thing that I will note overall about all of the Doctors. Whilst they all do sci-fi and history within each incarnation suits more to the sci-fi or the historical side more. So, for example, I don't know, Sylvester McCoy, he really suits the sci-fi. And in this case, I've always felt that Peter Davison really suits the historical pieces in his incarnation. So I was actually pleased when I found out that it was going to be a historical piece with Peter Davison. And I also find it intriguing that the story should actually be read by Matthew Waterhouse. Now, his character, Adric, wasn't actually very popular in the TV show. Now, I actually have a controversial opinion on that. I don't mind Adric at all, actually. What hurts Adric's character is the lack of writing that was put into the character that was supposed to be the Artful Dodger-esque mathematical genius that he is supposed to be. And Matthew suffered because of that. I've said it before, when he's got the stuff that actually is to his character description, he actually does absolutely fine. But when he hasn't got the stuff that is part of his character description, like for example in Black Orchid, it's just not, he's not sure where to take it, basically, is what I'm trying to say. However, Matthew reads this story very well indeed and seems to have an uncanny knack. And believe me, it really is uncanny in doing very different voices. There was like several points with several of the uh, like new characters that were introduced into the story that I actually thought it was a voiceover artist and not Matthew doing it. So that says a lot. He captures also Peter's breathlessness that he sometimes has to his incarnation of the Doctor. And whilst I'm just on the subject of Matthew, it's actually very nice to hear him extremely well directed. So, working well with the director, taking on board whatever the director has said and putting it into his performance. It's very clear when you actually spend times with actors, get them directed, get them talking about it, that the performance suddenly excels. It's amazing how that happens. This is also a man who is very, very improved on his stint from Doctor Who. He's come a long way since then, and he's also grown up a lot since then. So life experience also helps his performance here. So Will wastes no time in setting up the eeriness of this story starting out in Dickensian London with a character called the Admiral. Now, I'm not going to go too much into the Admiral, but it starts out with the Admiral, okay? So when you listen to the opening, it's actually, in my opinion, quite disgusting, to be frank with you. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. It's important to note that the thing about audiobooks and audio dramas is that because the eyes have no visual of the listener to actually look at, the mind's eye creates the visual instead. And I think with the nature of this story, this is what Will probably wanted to achieve. He definitely achieved it with me, that's for sure. My mind's eye was going to great lengths that could probably never be shown on television. He also does it multiple times throughout the story in more ways than one. Obviously, with what happens at the beginning, that comes back a couple of times. There's something in the middle with another character that happens, and it's like that's very visual. And I think something similar has happened in Doctor Who before, but it is very, very visual in your mind's eye. One thing is for sure is that this story does capture the essence of historical, not so much sci-fi type of style of Doctor Who, if you understand what I mean. So it's mostly the historical aspect with a little bit of sci-fi in there as well. It's certainly a more vivid story style than perhaps what we would actually get more in the audios than today's TV show, for example. And again, with a style of alien that isn't so common and the type of alien that really, really suits a historical piece where people, if you think about it, would be much more susceptible to manipulation than what people actually are today. Something that I also look for in the audiobooks is, does the story sound like Doctor Who? In this case, yes. Is the Doctor the Doctor? Yes. Are the companions the companions? In short, yes. Will only has about an hour in order to establish the companions, the Doctor, and the story. The one problematic character is Adric. As I said earlier, he wasn't written the way he should have been written in the TV show. That's not the case here. I suppose that the that great difficulty of the multiple companion formula from the 80s is knowing where to put all the characters, which resulted in multiple stories in the TV show where at least one companion was held to ransom within the walls of the TARDIS. And also, you have to remember to also keep the characterization the same as the character breakdowns would have been presented to the actor as. Now, I'm pleased to say This is not one of those cases. When they land in Dickensian London, the Doctor insists that they all change, which is actually a rarity for those four in the TARDIS. We see it in Black Orchid. By the way, this story, I believe, is set after Black Orchid, from what I could work out. All the costumes are described, but the one that had the biggest reveal, so to speak, was, of course, Adric, with what I believe was a nod to the actual writers of the TV show. Adric appears wearing an Artful Dodger style of outfit. What's more is when he discovers that he's been pickpocketed of something important, he himself in turn decides to be the Artful Dodger style ruffian trying to get that item back, which is why I think it's actually a nod to the TV show. Will took the advantage of the fact that it's set in Dickensian London to make a small point, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. It may not be true. We'll have to ask him about it, but that's just my opinion. He took that opportunity of the time period because obviously Dickensian London is Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist. Adric is supposed to be an Artful Dodger style of character. The only major critique that I have about the characters is that I wanted Tegan to have a bit more of a mouth and leg. She's actually my favorite companion from the classic era, and I think that's actually another bit of a controversial statement there, so to speak. But obviously, with a time crunch of an hour and 10, the division of the story with the travelers, there's only so much that you can do in order to achieve that, and he had to keep the plot coherent. Now, obviously, one of the main worries of when developing a plot like this and the travelers are spread everywhere, you run a very great risk of actually having the most chaotic plot that you possibly could have. Conciseness is the key. And Will is able to keep the plot concise, whilst they all end up in situations that are, for the Doctor, Nyssa, and Tegan, appropriate for the time period. And Adric experiences something very surreal for the sci-fi element. They all find out about this mysterious dark contract in some way, shape, or form. So that reunites them. Interestingly, as an observation, I wondered if Will had actually used ring composition for this story. Another name for that, I think, is the chiastic structure. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I've done creative writing. Now, if he has, then it's paid off. Whilst that type of plot writing isn't particularly common in the short form content that I've heard, it's more common in long stories with the symmetrical nature of this way of writing always has a more of a sense of a conclusion, if you know what I mean. You know, the symmetry, having key points staged throughout the particular plot and rounding it all off, and the symmetry just makes it feel more conclusive. I think that's what I mean. Will writes a very descriptive story. His use of words makes the imagination run wild. He has written a truly historical piece the way it should be done on Doctor Who. Whilst it may not be as action-packed as his last story, this one focuses on dark elements and at times some of the more vivid moments that you get in Doctor Who. It doesn't need the action as some of the other episodes do. The alien that is the threat presents the Doctor with a question of where the source is coming from, and only with the help from his companions is he able to work the dark mystery out. There's always something, anyway, that's very dark and serious that comes across in Dickensian London. So overall, a great, concise historical plot that's worth the listen. I give it an 8 out of 10. Now, I'll be interviewing Will again about this particular audiobook. He's coming back on. So if you would like to ask any questions, then please leave them in the comment that is pinned below. There's also a non-affiliate link in the description to the audiobook. I'll be back a bit later on tonight with a special episode because something dropped yesterday that I need to cover. But other than that, I will also be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. with the requested video of looking at Russell T Davies. Like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thanks very much for watching. I hope I didn't spoil you too much. Bye-bye.